Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and a very warm welcome to our Future Development Strategy Joint Steering Group Hearings meeting here for Monday the 13th of May 2024. Before we get into our order of business, if I could ask Te Kenehi for karakia. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, hui mai tātou kei runga te tēnei marae nui, ara ko te marae o hene. Nō reira te mea, te kaunihira, koutou hara mai mō tēnei kaupapa nunui, tēnā tātou. Kei noi tātou, te matu nui te rangi, anei o ponunga whakamoimati ki a koe, hei te aki, hei manaki a tātou, I te wā ka whiriwhiri ngā kōrero, pāna ki tēnei take nunui, o te taone nui o Pāmutana, Papai Oia, tēnei āhuatanga o ngoi nāia nei, I rotu te ingo tōtama me te wairua tapu. Āmene.
Kia ora, thank you. And look, if I could welcome those either online or in the chamber, and look, the meeting is being recorded, is being live streamed on our city's YouTube channel. And in terms of health and safety, just here, in the unlikely event of an emergency, we will evacuate via the green signs as we entered, and the assembly area is the clock tower in Te Maraehine, the square. In terms of health and safety, it is a non-smoking and vaping facility. Defibrillator, again, unlike the event of using a defibrillator, it's located in the foyer entrance of the customer service centre on the ground floor, and any incidences, please report those to our committee administration. If I could ask the speakers, certainly the officers, perhaps if they could just in the first instance, they say their name and their title, and that just makes it nice and clear for those online. For those online, I'd just like to acknowledge Chair Rachel Kidwell, who's online with us. Kia ora, Rachel. And we will now look to apologies. So in terms of our meeting papers, apologies. We have none. No, we have none. Number 3 is our standing orders for Part 2 adopted for both meetings, and that we agree to the Palmerston City Council Standing Orders Part 2 meeting procedures, and it's a recommendation to our joint steering group that we agree to conduct business for all meetings using the Part 2 of the PNCC's standing orders. I'm happy to move that, seconded by Te Kenehi. Thank you. Are there any matters arising from that? There being none, I'll ask you to vote, please. And that has passed, 6 votes for, none against. Thank you. 4 is around declarations of interest. Yeah, I haven't had anything from any of the members. Bearing in mind, we obviously represent our councils in a whole. So moving through to number 5, and this is around the officers and a summary of the submissions on our draft future development strategy. And I'd like to ask Keegan Aplin-Thane, our Senior Planner, and Leanna Shirley, our Senior Planner from Horizons, to speak to that. Over to you.
Tēnā koutou, ko Keegan Aplin-Thane aho, Senior Planner within Palmerston City Council Strategic Planning Unit. I have with me Leanna Shirley from Horizons, Senior Planner as well. I also just like to acknowledge, for the avoidance of doubt, we have Chief Planning Officer David Murphy and Chief Infrastructure Officer Chris Dyberg next to me. I'll be a fresh face in this process. I've been working in the background in the FTS team, just supporting the work and just helping to see it through towards the end. So you can treat me as a bootleg Samantha Dowse, if you will. Also just acknowledge we've got Rebecca Bell just sitting in the back here, just to that's assisted us throughout the entire process, quite instrumental. So with respect to the report in front of you, pretty standard summary of submissions for a special consultative procedure. I'm not expecting to go through most but more just point towards a few parts that have emerged that aren't necessarily reflected in the report, just to keep us up to date with the process. With respect to where we are in the process, so today I'm expecting that there isn't necessarily to be too much in the way of questions around deliberations or consideration of submissions. Today's just to understand everyone, all their point of views, and make sure that their submissions in writing are fully understood through their verbal commentary to that. That will assist us as officers to respond to those and with some recommendations to you on the 20th of May. We did receive a number of late submissions, so about 7 late submissions, particularly just because of some confusion between the submissions period closing on the 5th for this process for the FDS and of course the LTP, which is strongly related, on the 9th. That hasn't proved a problem for us with respect to being able to incorporate those submissions, late submissions, into the deliberations report, but they just won't be reflected in the summary of submissions, unfortunately. I'd like to just make a bit of a comment on, I suppose, how proud I am of the city in terms of submitter turnout. I know that this is quite a novel process for us. This is the first future development strategy that we've produced, and so it's hard to get a gauge on what's good in terms of turnout for submission numbers. So in total we've received 145 written submissions, and those for a variety of channels, but of course, there's different circumstances that drive different submitter numbers and things across the country for processes like these, but I'm pretty confident that we're pretty well up there compared to some of our other regions like Rotorua, Wellington, and Dunedin in terms of their submission numbers. We've also, it might be worth just raising a web map that we've produced just recently. It wasn't produced in time for the summary of submissions, but it will assist hopefully with deliberations. We've had our team just spatialise all the requests and submissions with respect to additions or removals for areas to our growth extents. We won't delve into that web map itself. We'll circulate the link to that for your consumption, but we hope that that will assist in terms of understanding where people are relating to. And then that's it from me, unless Liana has any particular points that I've missed, and we'll be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Keegan. Liana, now a couple of questions. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Keegan. So I just want to check that your intention when we come to the deliberations is to present a document with the submissions and an officer comment and some recommendations, if there are any recommendations for change as a result of submissions.
Yes, that's correct. So we'd prepare probably a set of appendices, just because the number of requests are quite large, or the number of concerns are quite large, and so we just want to break those down by section in the report with an officer comment and a recommendation. We wouldn't expect to be able to produce a final document with those draft changes in time for the deliberations report, just the recommended, I suppose, to-do list for us with respect to the 20th of May.
Sorry, you wouldn't expect to be able to produce that in time for the deliberations?
A final produced FDS document, no, just the recommendations.
Oh, okay, sorry, I misunderstood that. I was wondering how we're going to deliberate without the recommendations. Okay, yeah, so you wouldn't be able to give us an updated FDS document, but you'd be able to give us your response to submissions and if there are any recommendations as a result.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harpiter.
Thank you. Keegan, there was some comment about the drop-in sessions, that there wasn't the right expertise at the drop-in session to be able to answer some of the questions. I just wondered if you had a comment on that.
can I ask for some clarification? Is that with respect to, just because there are a variety of drop-in sessions, with respect to some of the LTP-related drop-in sessions that the FDS jumped onto, or more the Te Uu Tanganui specific
It
drop-in
was to
sessions?
do with, I think it was to do with the floods, and it was to do with on Roberts Line.
Yes, so the purpose of the drop-in sessions was to socialise at the first point the proposed master plan, with an expectation that we'd follow up with online web material that had all the current technical information available, because the drop-in session would be relatively inefficient to be able to run going through specific technical assessments for potential inquirers. So we thought not bulking up that process, and so all the current information that feeds into the master plan has been available online for view by the public for some time leading into this FTS process. So I'm comfortable that whilst we didn't have that technical information at the drop-in session, that we had it available online in an appropriate time period.
I'll just ask David Murphy to comment.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think one thing to, I guess, for the submitters and the joint committee to remember about this process, and in terms of looking through the submissions, I saw it come through quite a lot, is the FDS is quite a high-level strategic document. It's kind of what I'd describe as at the top of the funnel. So for you, for the joint committee members that have been on hearings panels, you'll understand that the level of evidence that's required to rezone land. This process does not rezone land. It's a broad framework for the future growth and development of the city. So there is a variety of processes that have to follow before any decision is made to change a district plan. So I think for some submitters, the level of detail that they're expecting, it is an important document that sets the scene, but it's not the process that will rezone land.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, there's no further question. Oh, sorry, there is. Te Kenehi.
No, that's it. Oh, kia ora. Good morning. I just wondered if there was a drop-in session for the iwi.
So with respect to both Rangitaneo Manawatu and with respect to the Bunnythorpe surrounding area with Ngāti Kaupata, we had some cultural advice throughout the scoring process and the scenarios assessment in the FDS itself, prior to it being released for consultation. We'd also been utilising the Te Whiri Kōkō process that we have internally, so the monthly meetings with hapu leaders to keep them abreast of current issues and the likes. We're also drawing on quite a significant range of experiences with our iwi partners through the preparation of, or exploration, sorry, of a lot of these areas that are currently underway. So those including Kaka Tangiata, to a lesser extent Roxburgh Crescent, Ashurst definitely, and recently medium density. So a lot of that feedback comes through those more current processes online. And then with respect to Ngāti Kaupata, they have been involved in the process for the preparation of Te Uu Tanganui as a master plan document, and also more recently in terms of how to respectfully acknowledge their interests in Bunnythorpe and the FDS itself. So we met kanohi ki te kanohi with a number of their, one of their leaders, and then have had email correspondence with the rest. Yeah, if that helps. Kapai.
Great, thank you. And I think if you can see on page 6 and 7 there, it sort of outlines the amount of work that did go in, and appreciate that some of it has backed on to LTP sort of here, drop-in sessions and consultation sector meetings. But there's over 1,500 people that have been have had some part to play in all of this. So, and look, there's been a real attempt on all sorts of media to get this in front of people. And I think you said, Keegan, that you were really happy with the amount of submissions that we've got, and I am too, because I mean this is new territory for us here in Palmerston North and the wider Manawatu. So I think it's testament to getting out to people and understanding, and their understanding of what we're trying to do as well. So look, we have a recommendation to our Future Development Strategy Joint Steering Group. The Future Development Joint Steering Group received the summary of submissions on the draft Palmerston North Future Development Strategy 2024. I'm happy to move that. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hapeta. Are there any comments to that? There being none, we will vote, please. It is passed. Votes for, none against. Thank you. We will now come to the main part of today, which is around the hearings, the submissions and the hearing of those. And look, councillors will know the process in terms of a 10-minute time frame per submission, and that includes question time for the submitters. There are a number in the room. I acknowledge you and welcome you. You have 10 minutes. Please take your submission as being read, and maybe a bit of an executive summary for us as councillors at the hearing here, and maybe leave some time for any questions there. So we now come to our first one, which is, got to move this first. Recommendation to the Future Development Strategy Joint Steering Group that the steering group hear submissions from presenters who indicate their wish to be heard in support of their submission. Number 2, that steering group note the procedure for hearing of submissions as described in the procedure sheet. I'm happy to move that. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Johnson. There being no comments, we will vote, please. That's passed, 6 votes for, none against. Right, we'll now move through to the main part, which is the submissions. And our first is number 105, and that's Chris Gasharel. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Grant.
And the time is yours now.
Thanks very much. Okay, so you've all read the submission, I believe, which is I appreciate. I guess 2 summary points, I guess, is you'll have seen that I don't support the expansion of the city outwards, but I very much support the upward and inward intensification. So that's, I guess, the first point. The second point is intensification to produce a well-functioning urban environment needs to be done really well and needs to have certain things done. It's not just about buildings and putting more of them in the same amount of space that previous buildings existed in. And in my submission, I've mentioned a number of things that need to be done. One is making sure that there is good public space, green spaces, meeting spaces, facilities, services, all relatively close to where people live if you're to get the real benefits of intensification. And also the provision of jobs. And that's why I am somewhat concerned that it looks like it's intended that all of the land that has up till now been zoned as industrial commercial within the wider residential area would be rezoned as residential. Because I think there's a lot of merit in maintaining little pockets of suitable commercial and industrial activity. I'm not talking about heavy industry next to people's homes, but suitable, clean and relatively quiet activities. And of course, if there is the provision of health services and retail and early childhood education, etc., that will also be providing jobs close to where people live. And I think that's the critical thing is if you're going to intensify, then you need to have all those services and opportunities close by. In regard to the first point that I made, which is that I don't support the outward expansion, I did provide a number of alternatives to that. So not only locating those things which are proposed to take up a lot of the industrial land, to locate those elsewhere in a much more, what I consider much more suitable location that would have the added benefit of regionally of providing employment in places that currently lack very many opportunities for that. But also besides the relocation of the airport, which I know you'll just absolutely love that idea, is also the utilisation of all that land, that huge amount of land that we have in the city that is occupied by what I call the stationary transport system. Okay, the bit where once people have got to their locations, they just park their vehicle and it sits there, often for 8 hours, 12 hours, sometimes over the night, the whole night. And it's just occupying space that would be so much better used in other ways. So I'll leave my comments at that and invite you to ask any questions of clarification or anything else.
Thank you, Chris. Just on the airport commentary, where if as you say in some of your in your submission, you would relocate the airport, are you saying it should go to Ohakia and we get rid of the airport here totally?
That's precisely what I'm saying. I know this issue has been canvassed over the decades, but it just seems such an incredible waste of resources to use land now in the city, was once upon a time outside the city, here, but also in Whanganui, and I know that's really the two major airports here, but actually setting up a truly regional airport that could benefit from the larger aircraft that are able to land at Ohakia, and it's actually a backup airport, as you know, for Auckland. It just seems such a waste of resources, and it's only a short distance away. And with a good public transport system out there, there are tons of places. I've flown through many an airport where you can look out to the military side of the airport, and all the civilians are on the civilian side. So I just don't know why it's never happened.
Okay, thank you. A couple of other questions. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Chris, for your submission. Just regarding your comment about not supporting the Greenfields development or any further Greenfields development, do you have an idea about how we would provide for enough housing in the city if we were not to do Greenfields?
Yep, over the next decade, I think it's fairly finely balanced, but that's based on a maximum height of 3 stories or 11 metres, I think. I think that in the very central part of the city, closest to the existing major retail and commercial zone, so West Street through to Ruahine Street, Grey Street through to Church Street, that the height limit should be 5 stories there, and then step that down as you go further out of what will, I presume, become the medium density housing area. So that would be the primary means of doing so.
Okay, thank you.
Just online,
Kia ora, Chris. Just checking in terms of your thoughts around why you don't support the growing out, and just whether you think we've got it right with the table that scores the different options. There's comment from another submitter, at least one, that says that we've got that scoring wrong, in that, for example, whether the impact of growing out on the environment is more or less than growing in and up. I just wanted some comment from you on that aspect.
Thanks, Rachel, and I hope you're feeling better. So what's wrong with growing out? Two things. I think it uses good land, uses land that would be better used for food production. And I think all the lands that are proposed to be used are class 2 or 3, I think. So they would fall, had we not started this process so far, they would have fallen under the NPS high quality soils. And yeah, I really think they are way too valuable to be used for these sorts of purposes. The second one is it makes us a more car-dependent society. Increases the distances that people have to travel, makes it more difficult for children and elderly and everybody actually, but especially those sorts of groups and disabled to meet all their needs, common needs fairly close to where they are. And of course all of those things, well, related to two things really, is one, the ability to create a sense of community in a relatively small area. And I think that's really overlooked when we keep expanding out and out and out. And secondly, of course, the greenhouse gas emissions that result from all that transport. And I think last week was an example of how people just saying, oh, well, we'll have electric vehicles, might not be the solution in the short term that people anticipate. In terms of the actual criterion that when I did look at those tables comparing the three approaches, personally I had some issues with those, what was said for each criteria for each option. But I didn't go into that in the submission. I thought, well, that's my view, and other people probably have other views. But I even sensed what I thought was a bit of inconsistency there. But I'm not in a position that I can refer to those right now.
Okay, and finally, Councillor Harpiter.
Thank you. Just very quickly, Chris, thank you for coming in. One of your opportunities was moving the rail hub to Martin and talking about it having jobs, but that would be losing jobs here in Palmerston North. Just what's your view on that?
Well, the jobs don't exist at the moment, by and large. I mean, okay, we'd still have a railway here, and that would still presumably provide some jobs for loading and unloading. But I mean, this rail hub sounds like it's going to be for a whole lot of new type of logistics and log hauling and stuff like that. Martin's 5 kilometres off State Highway 1. Locating it in between the township and State Highway 1 just seems like it would have so many advantages. There's all our rural areas struggle to provide employment, and it would provide a lot there.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Chris. Appreciate your time in putting your submission together, and that'll be considered in our deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, our next one is Mandy Shaw. Welcome, Mandy. And that's submission number 128.
Morning, everybody. Oh, apologies. So I thought I'd take a minute to let you know about the day in the life of a family that lives in Bunnythorpe. So on Fridays, my husband and I, we head to the bakery and we grab one of their great specials. On Saturday morning, we as a family, my son, my husband and I will hop on our bike or we'll walk to down to the corner by the roundabout to purchase our fresh vegetables. Soon we'll be looking at sending our son to Bunnythorpe School. We're on the other side of the tracks, so that means we have to safely walk or bike because there's no point in driving to school safely. My son also walks to meet his friends, and my sister and I live relatively close, and we also walk and see each other as well. So my name is Mandy Shaw. I am on the Greater Bunnythorpe Community Committee, but this is not their views. These are explicitly my views. My story living in Bunnythorpe differs from most. We recently moved there. The criteria for purchasing our property was actually within 20 kilometres of Palmerston North City. We both work in the CBD, and we absolutely love it here. There's a reason why we've stayed. We purchased knowing KiwiRail was coming. So we knew that our property was going to be backing on to the KiwiRail project that is happening. We lived in Milson. In fact, we backed onto the previous yard, so we understood the sounds that will be coming from that, and I do know that it's likely to be a little bit louder than what we were used to in Milson, but Milson has no sound protections. So I would be naive to think that change wasn't going to come. Now having a look at what is happening, I can kind of see what is potentially coming forward. So my personal property, it's not affected by this particular development. My property isn't for sale. I have friends whose are. But if everything does go ahead, please protect our community. We have been spending a lot of time recently trying to foster a really good community spirit. We've been coming together quite a lot. Please try go around us. When I say around us, send traffic around us, make it safer for our kids to be able to bike to school and to head to the dairies. If there is traffic going through, make sure that the way that we can get from every area of Bunnythorpe is safe for our kids and our elderly. Please look at fixing the infrastructure. I know that there have already been really good efforts in this space, but if you were to go forward with this plan, there's going to be needing some significant investment in that space. In my time that I've lived in Bunnythorpe, one of the roads has been blocked off by flooding, and that means that significant work will have to be done in that area. The water, which I've been told is some of the best water in the country, unfortunately it seems as if our pipes, they may need replacing, so our water is always brown or it's really hard, so it actually ruins our dishwashers and our jugs and all of the machines that we've got in our property, and I would hate to think that if we went forward with this and didn't do some significant investment in the infrastructure, having a jug of brown hard water sitting on the boardroom table of any of these new places probably wouldn't look good. We do have a bus stop out in Bunnythorpe as well, but it is on the other side of the tracks, so it's not one that I would be able to encourage my son to safely use. And please ensure that you're exhausting all alternatives that are currently available. So if there is industrialised area and that can serve the purpose that you're looking for, please ensure that that's all exhausted. Please protect the land which grows our food and contributes to the economy. And please ensure that there is a community planning exercise. Let's work together if change is happening. People like change to be had with them and not change happen to them. Please ensure that Ngāti Kōwhata is also brought in as well. They have been incredibly lovely to come and explain the history of Bunnythorpe as well, and I understand that it's a really funny area, but involving everybody would, when I say funny area, I mean funny location in terms of where everything is, and the perception of who would be consulted. Just everyone being consulted is probably the better option. To move forward with this and to not consider our community as a whole would be an absolute shame. Please be pragmatic with the decisions that you're making. We do have a beautiful community out there, and we would like to, where possible, keep that community vibe and keep it safe for the future of Bunnythorpe. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mandy. Just a couple of things there, and thank you for your submission. Just on the planning, you do know that Ngāti Kōwhata and Rangitane are on the planning, the governance group.
Yeah, I did see that when I looked at the website after I made the submission, but I just kind of wanted to make it pretty
Emphasise
clear.
it. No,
Yeah.
that's cool. And also, you are aware that in our long-term plan, there is a community planning or a village planning program in the LTP.
Yes, yep, I did see that as well. Yep, I just wanted to drive that one home too.
Yeah, and I'm just addressing some of your concerns. Also, grade separation. If there was some form of ring road, there would be grade separation between the railroad and a road. So you would have some sort of safety, sort of ensure, safety would be ensured there.
Would be great, thanks.
All right. There's no questions. Okay. Look, thank you, Mandy. And again, thank you for the time for your submission, and all your views will be taken into the deliberations.
It's great.
Appreciate it.
that.
Thank you. Okay. We're up to our third submitter, and Darrell Martin, Senior Planner, Chris Lowe, Mike Taylor, Cam Twigley. This is around LT projects. Welcome, gentlemen. Please take your submission as being read, and if you want to leave a bit of time for questions, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So my name's Mike Taylor. I'm a director of LT Projects. Chris Lowe's my fellow director. LT Projects was formed because we had an opportunity to acquire 14 hectares of land at 231 Pioneer Highway in 2020, and with the intention of being development for urban growth of the city. So as I said, the directors are Chris and myself. The land is within the proposed Kaki Tangiita urban growth area in Palmerston North's western boundary, and it's close to the city, so it's a natural progression and across the road from Kiki Whenua. We just see it as a natural progression of the city with the potential to connect, as I said, into the development that's happening across the road. We are motivated to help meet the future forecast of housing development, and we have been working on this over the last 4 years to create a fresh, more affordable section sizes and lots and walkways and natural parks and waterways alongside the Mangoni stream, to create the opportunity for recreation, walking, cycle tracks on your back doorstep. So I think that's fundamental to it, whereas at the city you have blocks of housing and land and you drive to the Esplanade. Our vision is a little bit that you're going to walk out of your house and have a natural park on your doorstep where you can walk and cycle and connect around the city. And so for that reason you can have a bit more intensive housing because you don't need to kick a ball around in the backyard so much. The Mangoni stream, we believe, is central to the design of the neighbourhood and will open up the subdivision to front that stream and provide an everyday connection with that local waterway and recreation. We've been working with Boone and BTW to develop the plan in conjunction with the City Council. We have had meetings with Rangitane and with the City Council on various occasions to make sure that our visions are aligned with yours. So we have a collaborative approach. We're not sort of trying to muscle our way into our own ideas. So for that reason, we think that we're sort of got a common vision. So working with Rangitane is obviously an ongoing thing, but we have had discussions with them about what we can do to work alongside them, particularly around the fact that the the old Paras on the other side of the road, but also their connection with that area with BirdLife. And we've talked to them about, creating things within the parks that create, what is important to them, which was the bird life in that area in the early days. And also the old Mangoni stream bed that runs through there as well. So we have engaged with Horizons, and we have rebuilt the stop bank and shifted it to make that wider, and that's all in preparation for having that safe for future housing. And that stop bank's been rebuilt. We've also purchased additional land on Pioneer Highway to unlock the entranceway to it, so that we can get a roundabout or intersection at a safe distance from the Mangoni Bridge. And so, obviously we've sort of invested a reasonable amount of money to sort of keep this, project going. We're keen to progress it. We just feel that what has been a bit disappointing is perhaps the ideals that we had 4 years ago with the council progressing this Kaka Tangiata area seems to have slowed down now to the stage that we are, having to consider whether we go down a private plan type route, which sort of means that you're going to get people trying to push their own ideas instead of a big collaborative one. So I'm not sure that that's a good thing for this development of this land, and how that will sort of connect into the wider aspirations that everyone might have. So, we are motivated. We would just like to think that the future development strategy might be able to help us sort of push this along a little bit sooner than later, so that we can keep the momentum going. We see that the land will probably be good for 220 sections, so that's a reasonably significant chunk. The land that we've acquired will allow the connection between the north and south, between Kikawhenua, and so that will create this flow between the communities. There's also the opportunity for the bridge over the Mangoni connecting into Amberley, which will also connect those communities, and particularly if there's going to be some commercial enterprises in the area, will sort of help create a better opportunity for that side of the city that doesn't really have a lot of that sort of local stuff. So, but so that's LT Projects.
Thank you, Mike. I acknowledge you, Marilee, as well. Thank you for coming to support your clients there. A couple of questions from me. Chris, you've come to see me before about trying to rev things up and get things moving a bit quicker. I understand the state highway network improvements, the lowering of the speed limit, which the city is absolutely for, has been refused by our friends at NZTA and government agency. In your opinion, what's your views on that?
Yeah, well, obviously that's critical to, be able to build houses that are closer to the State Highway 1 and make it safe for the community. So, that is disappointing, yeah.
Okay. I'll open it up for questions. Councillor Harpiter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just looking at your submission, and you talk about that council should support breaking larger Kakataniaka area further into smaller stages. What are you talking about there specifically?
I think with these 770 hectares, I think it is, of that Kaka Tangietu, is that it's such a big land area to resolve all of the issues with, and that because our area is more self-contained on the boundary and the closest to the city, it is possible for that to be broken up because we are nestled amongst lifestyle blocks that sort of keep it as an area in itself. But in our discussions with people with lifestyle blocks, a lot of them, there's probably as many who are dead against it as there are that would be waiting to hear what happens so that they can create more housing with their own lifestyle blocks as well. So I think there is future for that to sort of, to grow into a bigger area.
So to press you a bit further, when you say smaller stages, do you mean smaller blocks, or I'm just trying to press you?
No, smaller stages as in lumps of land area as opposed to the big trying to resolve the whole big land area and and then get that consented. Yep. So how do you turn this on?
You just push it. There it is.
Hello. Yeah. Hi. Yes, I suppose what we would be seeking out of the future development strategy is the area that Chris and Mike have been recognised as a, if you like, stage 2 of Kaki Tangiata. So following on from Kiki Whenua as a discrete rezoning. So when we refer to breaking Kaki Tangiata down into smaller areas, that's rather than a future plan change coming on board that would look at that whole Kaki Tangiata area, which is obviously a very big area, seeking to break it down into a plan change that might be progressed within the short term rather than the medium to long term, given how far Mike and Chris are progressed with some of their development concepts and land acquisition processes. So that's what we're seeking. Those are the main changes that we're seeking to the development strategy.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gordon.
Kia ora, thank you. One of the questions I had, I think you've already answered, so with regards to the staging, I found that really valuable comment there. So just wanted to know a couple of things around financing of infrastructure. I think there was a comment you made in the submission there that if there was not funding currently made available, and that might be the hold-up for progressing rezoning, etc., that a discussion with developers around financing of infrastructure is a potential. Can you just elaborate on that, please?
I think that was made in relation to that there could be a number of mechanisms that would provide financing for a plan change, whether that's, a private plan change with that's developed in conjunction with council, and there's private developer agreements around financing, or it's, seeking funding through other means. It was just, if we can have recognition of the short-term opportunity in the future development strategy, then that kind of opens the door, I guess, for discussions around provision of infrastructure and how that's financed and that sort of thing.
Wonderful. Thank you for the clarity. And the other question I had was around some comments you made around noise setbacks. And I think there was a comment there around avoiding development in those setback areas as opposed to there are mitigation methods available. So can you just walk me through that a little bit, what you might like to see there?
You summed it up well. So, I mean, with the state highways, there's, minimum setbacks to protect reverse sensitivity issues arising from the noise that comes from the state highway. Or there are interventions in terms of, designer dwellings and acoustic treatments and that sort of thing. So potentially coming a little bit closer to the state highway, provided that those design mitigation measures are built in. So does that sort of explain?
Yes, it does. So is it that you would be more supportive of looking at mitigation measures within those setbacks as opposed to a complete blanket prohibition?
I mean, that would be something that I guess we'd need to consider in terms of if say, for example, there is a higher, the speed limits aren't reduced on the highway, then potentially more noise, so those setbacks are greater. So that kind of eats into your, I guess, development potential for the site. So that would be something that would, as we got into detailed design, we would have to weigh up whether you build in some extra cost into the development to come a bit closer to the state highway. That would be sort of an economic decision, I guess.
Thank you. Very helpful. Thanks.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. That's well and truly over our time, but that's okay. I've just got 33 submitters to get through, so I will have to end it there. But thank you for your energy and your submission and your all your comments will be taken into the deliberations, so appreciate you coming in. Thank you. Okay, we're now through to our fourth submitter, and that's Liam Dickinson. Welcome, Liam, from Second Chapter Partners. That's submission number 88.
Kia ora everyone, thanks for the opportunity to submit today. You should have all received a handout, and we've got a presentation that's just being popped up in addition to our submission. Before we introduce the property, I think it's important to sort of outline a little bit about how and why Second Chapter Partners has identified this particular site. So we're a long-term experienced development. We've got and the principals and partners of that group also run a specialist logistics infrastructure fund that has a number of different ties and projects potential into this region. And that's what's led us to start looking at this site. But on a personal level, for me, I've spent the last 20 years travelling back and forth from Tauranga to Palmy, because with being one of 5 children that all needed orthodontics, and the entirety of my mother's side of the family living down here with a number of dentists, it made for a fairly regular 5-hour journey each way down to Palmy. So Palmy's got sort of a very special place in my heart. My grandparents were based here up until recently, until they passed away. All of my aunties and uncles, and there's a huge community down here that I want to see grown. So if you can, who's controlling ours? Oh, perfect. You've got, sweet. So the land that we refer to in our submission as the Bunnythorpe Business Park sits in between the rail designation area and areas D and E in the FDS, the draft FDS. It's in our view that our site is significantly superior to some of the other areas in D&E, and it's our understanding that through this process that council's really been looking to outline the industrial land requirement for this region over the next 30 years. And I think from our side, we want to applaud the council for actually doing that work. And from our analysis, actually identifying the true amount of hectareage that's required to deliver the industrial work that's going to come over the next 30 years. However, where we start to disagree is is the allocation of that land. So we see the proposed areas satisfy the long-term supply, but C&E we don't support primarily for the following reasons. They don't seem to take advantage of the additional infrastructure expenditure that is going to be required to be undertaken for these to be taken advantage of. What we mean by that is the additional roading infrastructure and the additional piping infrastructure. That the C&E are quite disparate, and so there's no synergy between that spend. D specifically has additional infrastructure costs, such as an overpass or improved crossing requirements to try and get through some of those commuter roads, and that'll need to be passed on somehow. And then specifically from a logistics perspective, they're not contiguous with the RFH, so the rail freight hub. That isolation, both from a cargo interest, but also from a citywide interest, doesn't take into account the increased greenhouse gas emissions that we'll see from increased transport. And as outlined in our submission, Scope 3 emissions are really what are going to get the New Zealand cargo interests, and that hasn't really been considered through any of the FDS planning arrangements that I can see. It also takes away the ability for operators to choose more efficient or higher productivity and therefore lower cost options to get their cargo or their requirements into the regional freight hub, because they're required to enter onto either local or government roads. There's no ability to integrate into the freight hub, so you lose the ability to run high productivity vehicles that or alternative transports. And then specifically inside locations C and E, we don't think the reverse sensitivities have been considered for the surrounding land uses, especially in the context of that higher end lifestyle property. When I look at Palmy, I see what I see in most regional sort of centres is that there's a way of life and a way of living that encourages people to come and have larger blocks or larger lifestyle type blocks that allow them to have professional jobs, but experience the parts of New Zealand that we really like, the green, the farming, that sort of thing. And so that seems, if anything, to have been missed through the FDS. There's a lot of talk of growing up or increasing density and the likes, but I think, we're a massive supporter of, but I do think there is an important element to be considered, that people that have chosen that way of life are considered through that, and specifically down in Area D, Area C in the plan. It hasn't seemed to take into account the existing lifestyle zone that's there. So it's for those reasons that we believe the council should prioritise the Bunnythorpe Business Park over the others, because we're not specifically looking to increase the level of proposed industrial supply. We think the numbers that have been put out there are enough. However, we're just looking we're proposing to council that there is a reallocation of the future industrial land for land that's fundamentally better suited. Some of those things that we think are the 80 hectare site that is currently within our control is the only large scale contiguous land available under a single ownership. Now, that single ownership has been reiterated to us as being quite important, given from both local sales agents and from CEDA, given the current industrial land ownership. Given that current industrial land ownership is typically held between 2 or 3 families inside this region, and when we proposed this to CEDA just to understand whether or not they would be supportive of having an additional industrial zone coming online, their response was specifically, this is one of the most exciting economic opportunities of the last decade from CEDA, your economic development agency. They see the current land provision coming from the current land offers as impacting and reducing the ability to create jobs in your region. We're the only growing out region that takes advantage of all of the roading and infrastructure upgrades, the ring roads, the increased roundabouts, and the RFH, and we'll be delivering this in a way that creates jobs. So we will be delivering lands for sale to market. Where we think this has been excluded from the FDS is primarily because of a perceived flood risk or this perceived stormwater area, and while we've engaged external advice, Richard will run through the high level on that.
Yeah, obviously 2017 flood model and the 2021 flood model has quite a vast difference in flooding. It's increased by a further 20 hectares. There remains about 16 to 18 hectares of land that doesn't flood on the site, so there's no flooding whatsoever on it. And to analyse this new flood model, which we've only recently got, we've engaged Water Technologies to have a look at how a landform could be created that would enable more land free of a flood hazard while not affecting upstream or downstream flood effects, as well as attenuating additional on-site stormwater. So Water Technologies, not only did they analysed the flood model, but they've also analysed the water velocities through the site, and they're quite confident that a stormwater system can be created and improvements along the Mangone stream can be created to alleviate some of that flood risk to the site, and also create some ecological benefits to the stream corridor. With the handout that's been sent round to you, we've included Tauriko Business Estate in Tauranga, and that's about a 200 hectare industrial development site built within a floodplain, and it's managed stormwater by creating live storage areas in flood events and offline attenuation treatment ponds. Just in terms of the importance for inclusion in the FDS, obviously we've got the NPS HPL gateways that we've got to have a look at. So if this site is to be considered, then it's critical that it gets included in the FDS as a planned growth area. That makes the pathway for a plan change, whether it's a collaborative one adopted by council or a private plan change. Makes that process a whole lot smoother. The site obviously benefits from all the road improvements on Roberts Line and Kainga Bunnythorpe Road, and is actually contained within that area. So there's an opportunity for integration of stormwater infrastructure both within the KiwiRail site and 2CP site.
Yeah, so just outlining further, just once again, so in our presentation, you'll see the Bunnythorpe Business Park is in that wonderful little white spot between the proposed growing out areas, and so what we would be suggesting is that reducing or removing areas C, D, and E to include that, and making the Bunnythorpe Business Park the 10th component of Te Utanganui.
So Liam, just we're just running really short of time, okay. So you could wrap up, maybe just summarise.
We can, yeah. So in very simple terms, we believe that with appropriate stormwater solutions, engineered solutions, we should be able to vastly increase the net developable area of Bunnythorpe Business Park, and therefore ask the council to carefully consider the inclusion of this land. And we're open for questions.
Okay, and I'll just allow one quick question, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to be really clear what you're asking. You're asking us to include this particular parcel of land that you own in the FDS as industrial land. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the suggestion that we might reduce or remove areas C, D, and E, is that because you agree with the total yield of industrial land and so this is your kind of trade-off, or do you have a strong feeling that C, D, and E are unsuitable?
So we believe the allocation of land is the area of land is correct. However, for the reasons outlined in our submission, our C, D, and E are inferior to our location that we're proposing. So we think that there is a far better business case for our land to be included, and the only reason that it hasn't been included is for the flooding risk. Okay. And we believe that what we've evidenced, we think through our engineer, that there are suitable solutions for that, and therefore it should be included.
Okay, so you're suggesting that we could trade off your area of land for C, D, and E, basically. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, and again, thank you for your submission. It will be taken into deliberations. Okay, now moving to submitter number 90, they're online, and acknowledge Foodstuffs North Island Limited, so Simon Williams, David Borison, Daniel Sadler, and Mike Nixon. G'day, David, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name's David Borson. I'm part of the development team at Foodstuffs. I understand you've got our submissions and we'll take that as read. We also will send through a further 1.5 page summary. I'd like to talk to you today about a few pertinent points, and then I've obviously got my legal, planning and traffic engineering team there as well if there's any technical questions that anybody would like to go into in terms of working through this process. We obviously are engaging already under Te o Tanganui, but have some significant concerns around how the FDS works, and we recognise it needs to be delivered, but at the way it's currently written and referencing the full of Te o Tanganui, it has some issues for us. And so what we're trying to do is work together with council to support this initiative, but also see a development that works for ourselves there in the future as well. FDS needs to be more practical and recognise that at a much higher level. Some of the policy documents that have been referenced are still in the early conception and design stage, but they're going to get baked into this by this process. The FDS obviously has quite a bit of standing as the process goes through under the NDS and the plan change framework, and we just don't want to see a whole lot of very high level ideas at this stage that we've got some concerns with get even further baked into this process as we go through it. And that's also coming through right through in terms of your requirements to start developing development contributions, policies, etc., under the RMA directives that you have there in terms of that process. So we've got particular concerns around Te o Tanganui. I'm going to reiterate those for your benefit now. The first one being the grade separation up and over beside us on the corner of Richardson's Line going across the railway track there. For us, Roberts Line, not Richardson's Line. Roberts Line is a significant point of entry and exit for us, and so maintaining that exit and entrance into the future is quite critical for us. As we move to the Richardson's Robertson Line, we have worked quite hard in the past with Kiwi Rail in terms of their designs for that corner of that intersection. I understand council is looking further and long term at traffic solutions much further out than just the Kiwi Rail proposals, but at the moment we're seeing some very high level plans that show a significant land take from our land, and we're currently proposing to lodge building or resource consents very shortly, and we've already got earthworks consents in for the use of that land at the moment. So we're running up against each other here, and we just need to find a practicable way forward to go through it. As we move round, we've got a couple of lines thrown on the page there for a future road through the rear of our site, some stormwater and some green corridors through there that we would like to see removed. And sorry, somebody's just sharing that on screen with us now in terms of working through that. So we don't see any need for this rail connection. We've got detailed submissions there showing that road connection is not required. You've got one down here that will work sufficiently. This green and stormwater corridor is also not required in terms of how we're working through our site at the moment in terms of that development. So it really hampers us in terms of that process going forward. So obviously discussions are ongoing with officers, but at the moment, the way everything is written, some of these aspects need to be removed, both here or referenced to be removed, to provide us with a certainty going forward for our development working through there.
Right, thanks, David. So the two things I'm getting from you here is the roading hierarchy, and secondly, the which the last submitted said the same thing around the stormwater and flooding methodology that's being used. Is that correct?
Yep. So we've got, obviously we've got some quite detailed plans that we're working through for our property at the moment, and if these matters get embedded in Te o Tanganui and Te o Tanganui is referenced without any changes in the FDS, they then get baked in, and so going forward it leaves council with fewer and fewer options in terms of its planning development. Obviously there is a plan change process, and we will be party to that, but we still feel that some of these things just need to be flagged at quite a high level now, as that some of the stuff is not fixed in terms of working through that process.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions. Councillor Hapeta.
Thank you, David. So I'm just trying to understand your language. I do appreciate you submitting. So you just want the wording, you want us to, trying to...
If the FDS could recognise that it is a high-level document and some of the detail is still to be developed, and I suppose this is with Te Uatanganui coming through in parallel, is we haven't got certainty under that document yet to be able to build in certainty into this document, and so it's working through both those processes. How do we recognise is that Te Uatanganui is, we've had a great crack at that first development stage of that document, but it is, I think, still, we'd refer to it as a living document. It is still getting developed out further, and we need to be able to recognise there should be some flexibility for some changes as we work through that process.
Sure. And the other point that you've made, which is 9.3, about the land acquisition from the facility to incorporate a new slip on Roberts Line, that's quite an operational point, and it's still probably being discussed with officers.
Yes, but it's getting, in terms of this, is as the FDS references Te Uatanganui and Tuananui references further other plans that council's working on, you have to give effect when you do the plan changes to the FDS. And so by the fact that they are referenced here and now, and we're seeing provisions for them, they then get buried and baked in into the process. And so that somebody later on has to give effect to those provisions.
Okay, thank you, David.
Chair Rachel online.
Kia ora, David. Thank you for your submission. Just wanting to check, I mean, I hear the points about the area of the city where you are, and I've heard those when you submitted to our council as well. I just wanted to double check in terms of the scale, looking at the FDS as a whole, because your statement in your submission says that unless the relief sought in your submissions granted, the FDS will fail on a whole bunch of areas. Are you meaning just in relation to that corner of the city, or do you have a bigger scale problem with the FDS?
Well, I suppose there is potentially a larger scale problem for everybody. Sorry, that was my computer going to sleep as we sat here, not moving the mouse enough. The issue here is some of the details that we're talking about are also being spoken to by other submitters. And so the stuff that's pertinent to us is going to get baked in. The same sort of points will affect other people elsewhere in terms of that process. My focus is much more on our local area. What do we need to do getting between our site and back out to the ring road and working through that. And then obviously we've got a large fleet of trucks that are servicing over 1.5 million people every week, getting food out to supermarkets across the whole of the lower North Island. We've got to know that when we make this investment, our planning horizons are as long as councils in terms of working through that. This is a very significant investment for us, and so we want certainty around that in terms of that process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, David. I just want to be sure that I understand what you're saying. So is it your opinion that if something is in the FDS, that's written in stone and can't be changed?
Daniel, do you want to perhaps jump in here? Sorry, the technicalities of the RMA.
Yeah, sorry. So Daniel Sadlier, I'm the lawyer that's acting for Foodstuffs North Island in relation to this. I guess the issue that we have is that the FDS has a particular status under the MPSUD and therefore under the RMA. So the RMA requires that the MPSUD is given effect to in future plan change processes, and the FDS itself is required to be had regard to in those plan change processes, and also under the MPSUD, and is also strongly encouraged to inform other decisions that you make in terms of funding, infrastructure planning and funding, for example. So the issue we have is if the FDS, in its referencing of Te Uatanganui, incorporates too much of a high level of detail, then it sets up a presumption through these future processes that those details will then be given effect to and carried through. So from Foodstuffs' perspective, it's just trying to protect itself and the council from setting up a situation whereby an inappropriate level of detail is, or an inappropriate potential result is, as David says, baked in to that process, and there's a presumption that that will be given effect to.
Okay,
Is
so
that clear? Does that make sense?
it's very clear to me because I am an RMA commissioner, so I didn't
Excellent,
really need the
excellent.
preamble, but that's fine.
Apologies.
In terms of the in terms of your understanding, then it sounds to me that you're very clear that that it's to be given effect to. It doesn't mean that every detail that's in the FDS will have to be carried through into a plan change, does it?
Well, there's it doesn't necessarily mean that,
No.
but the language used in the MPSUD, which you have to give effect to, does include those words, strongly encouraged and have regard to. So I agree with you, there's a degree of flexibility there, but we're setting up a situation whereby the starting point is one that we say you can resolve now without then putting Foodstuffs or any other participant in those future processes to the cost, I guess, and the time burden of trying to then rebut a presumption you could have resolved now.
Thank you for explaining your understanding.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, David. And I understand officers are talking to you, so that's all good. Again, appreciate your submission. As always, all of that will be taken into deliberation coming online. All right, we move through to our next submitter, which is number 99, and Grant Stevenson. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Boy, my submission's pretty lame compared to some of the last ones we've had, but I'm really here as a concerned citizen and ratepayer. I've been here since I was 10, I've been here 50 years. I sort of like looking at I've been reading part of the long-term plan, the development stuff, a little bit over my head, but I just have a few questions. One was our future development with our cycleways and stuff like that. We've seen a little bit of a debacle going on lately. I kind of wonder about how we got to that. I think it's great, encouraging sporting movement around the city and stuff like that, getting rid of vehicles. I'd just like to see it done a little better. I'll just go through the submission as I put it in here because it'll be the easiest for me. There's said opportunities. I've also wondered about like trains, more trains to Wellington, Wanganui and backwards and forwards. If we're growing an industrial hub and stuff here, surely Wanganui, Wellington is less than an hour's train drive away. Lots of people commute from here to Wellington to go to work. Could we bring them back this way to help with industrial growth here? I was really interested in one of the submissions from a developer here with the Bunnythorpe hub. Didn't know that was happening. I'm not really onto it, but because the rail hub's going out there and another logistics hub and stuff like that, it seems like a fairly good idea. The highlight for me is the hydrology part of it, and I presume you guys have a fairly good hydrologist here who's keeping a tap on the consultant or the developer's consultants who are doing their own checking it out, what is and what isn't, rather. If I come down here to the constraints, one of the concerns I've just seen is just with the infrastructure in PNCC. Like I said, I've been here a long time. I think there was 70-odd thousand people when I moved here. Now there's 90-odd thousand people plus, I think 600 a year. I sort of worked that out over my lifetime that I've been here. I don't know what our future development strategy in numbers is, but we seem to have infrastructure that's failing on the numbers and we've been growing. Are we going to be causing ourselves the same sort of problem as we grow bigger if we're not looking at what we've got? The growing up, not really into the growing up thing. I come from Ashurst. I live just out of Ashurst now. I used to be in Ashurst. I like the community aspect. The lady that was here from Bunnythorpe, she likes the community aspect. I used to live in Takaro. It was a great community when I was a younger fella. We had lots of friends living in Highbury, community. I kind of like more myself. I know we've got to go somewhere. I don't like the idea that we're going to tin can people and make us sardines and squash us into a small area. I'd like to see the council considering that growing out, for my idea, is probably the best idea, because I like the idea if you can build more communities. People like community sort of stuff. I think when we come into town, the community aspect is lost and we become very small focused groups. I was sort of covered growing out. So for information for 30 years growth, I just like to think we can get the infrastructure sorted. I've been to a couple of meetings lately about projects and stuff and the cost of our new sewage plant and stuff like that. I live on a small rural block, so I don't hook into the sewage plant, but I understand the necessity of it. We've been growing. Have we actually been doing due diligence as a community with we're growing? Do we need to put money aside to expand on our wastewater treatment plant, on our water supply, our stormwater, because it seems like everywhere nowadays we get bigger rainfalls. Are we accommodating this in our forward thinking? The rail hub, we've got to go somewhere. The back of everyone's houses in the middle of Palmerston is probably not ideal anymore. With the trains, asbestos, brake linings and stuff like that, it'd be good to see industrial as industrial, urban as urban. And I live on Ashurst Road, so when that comes into effect and the ring roads all come to effect, my road's going to get very, very busy. But it's got to happen. So something's got to happen. So we just got to wear that sort of fact that with growing, we're going to get more traffic and stuff like that. Going forward for future state, I'd like to see a little bit better communications from the council to the public. Keep it simple. The last couple of public meetings I've been to, lots of people don't, I think they sort of, it's very intense and lots of information and stuff, and they'd like to know more, but they just can't get it all in, absorb it all in. And I'll put down here the 15-minute city stuff, because it's been a bit of a highlight through a number of people I know. I don't think we're going down 50, because you can't get from one side of Palmy to the other in 15 minutes now anyway. It took me a good part of half an hour just to drive from Rangatiki Line into the square this morning. But no, I think we're going well, and I just hope with the future developments you do sort of take on board the community's requirements and stuff like that. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I'll just pass to Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Stevenson, for coming in, talking to us. Just your last comment there about council having better communications with the ratepayer. Is there something specifically that you'd like to see council doing that we're not doing at the moment?
Well, I can only hark back. I've never really had a problem with it, because if I want to know what you're doing, I can always check it out. But just the last couple of public meetings, the easiest one for me to pick on is like Featherston Street. Lots of people that live down that street or affected by the transition and the roading didn't like, the last one I went to, I think maybe 3/4 of the people there had never known about it, but they're affected by it. So I just use that as a basis to say, if that's sort of happening, our council inviting enough people to know. I don't quite know how to say what I'm trying to say there. Or broadcasting it wide enough. Because it just seemed that there's a small group of people that are affected by, not a huge piece of works within the city, but it seemed like there was, out of say 1,000 people, it only seemed like there was about 20 people knew about the whole thing. So going forward, if we're doing major stuff like that, and I mean, I've got no problem with paying rates and stuff like that, because I want to see development and have services. But if we're getting things, if we're not included in decisions, or even have the ability to make like come along and do this today, I don't know. I wondered if if there is a better way of communicating to a greater audience for sort of thing.
Yes, well, I was hoping you might have an idea about that, because certainly we're doing our best, but clearly we're not getting to people, so,
I can't remember seeing a lot of sort of preemptive stuff for, and like, what do we get the Fielding Herald, I think it is a local rag that we get. I don't know if the Evening Standard still runs. I presume it still goes. I mean, if you're putting out information, those sort of stuff, are they tiny little ones? Are they half-page ones to keep down on costs? Or I honestly, I'm not a media relations person, so I couldn't really help you on that one. But I just sort of got the general feeling that a lot of people thought they weren't getting information on what you guys were doing. That's all.
All right, thank you.
So, Mr. Stevenson, just a couple of very quick comments from me. In terms of the trains, and my colleagues here from Horizons will, I'm sure, would jump in if I get this wrong, but the Capital Connection is a service that takes commuters, a commuter train, and there is real push to have more services, multiple services a day, and that includes coming back up here in 7 days a week. So certainly we share your views around opportunities there. Around flood methodology, hydrology, I mean, it is all independently peer reviewed, so it isn't just one person making that decision. There is quite a bit of evidence and work in the background there. And look, I think nobody here disagrees with you around infrastructure and looking after what we already have. The problem is the cost has just gone through the roof, and that is sometimes a real challenge, like your own household. But look, thank you very much. There's no more questions for you. Thank you very much for your submission. Appreciate this is you coming in, and we will take all your commentary and your submission into our deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now to our last submitter of this session, and we've got Robert McLaughlin online. Welcome, Robert. That's submission 101. Floor is yours, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Very good. Thanks for welcome to everybody. I'd like to thank the previous speakers. That was very interesting to listen to. So from my submission, it will be clear that I'm opposed to the growing out strategy and I'm supporting growing up. And the thing I've tried to understand in my submission and want to talk to today is how did that process arrive at a recommendation, which is basically all of the above? The balance strategy is doing a little bit of both growing up and growing out and the village growth. So I can give you my proposed answer, but it's not something I understand in full. So one of the key things is that reasons that growing up was marked down was because of the lack of a city stormwater strategy, in particular one that was agreed to by Rangitane. So I certainly support Rangitane in their urgent desire for a stormwater strategy. That's extremely important. But that decision, that process has to be undertaken at the same time as this future development strategy is finalised, because they're clearly extremely closely related to each other. What kind of development you can have to reduce the flooding risk and to treat the water risk properly very much depends on how you are going to deal with the stormwater. And my initial impression is there's vast areas of paved land in the existing footprint of the city that doesn't need to be paved. It's currently got very low value uses. Nearly half of the central city is simply ground level car parking. There are many things that could be looked at in order to resolve that issue. And the second thing, of course, as will be clear from my submission, is climate change. And I just couldn't believe the process, the scoring process that was gone through in order to mark down growing up and to mark up in favour of growing out. Growing out and traditional suburban greenfield development will definitely increase emissions much more than the growing up. It will also lead to a less compact city. So it was even growing out was even given a positive score for creating a more compact city. So almost all of those scores there, you'll see from my submission, I completely disagreed with, and I can only conclude that environmental factors are just being systematically downgraded all the way through that assessment process in favour of other things. In fact, all the other things that are discussed in there. So perhaps the underlying issue here is the relative weights that are given to these different topics. Of course, we're trying to balance very, very long list of factors. We have a housing crisis, we have a climate crisis. So who is going to stand up for the environment, essentially? It seems to have been systematically downgraded. In the course of the submissions on the Plan Change G for Okoteri, I was able to find out that this our current strategy, which is for 55% greenfields housing, which is in the growth strategy now, that's completely unchanged in the light of the NPS on urban development, and it's completely unchanged with the zero carbon bill and the need to reduce emissions. So it's as if all of these things haven't impacted on our direction of travel in Palmerston North at all. But the thing that gives me hope is that I know that other councils around New Zealand have changed their direction because of those things, because of the housing crisis, the climate crisis. Other cities do have a climate change plan, which they're actually carrying out and attempting to reduce emissions. So, of course, all these things are pretty complicated and linked, but the local government has a very important role in these things, particularly on housing and transport. And this plan that's under consideration today really shines a light on how we got into this mess in the first place, in my view, and how we now need a change of direction. I'll just leave it there and take questions.
Thank you, Robert. Number of questions. I'll go to you first, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Robert. I just, on your point around how did this arrive at the balanced growth, and some of your comments in your submission with regard to the scoring, I found that really interesting. So just wanted to clarify, there was, I think, 5.6 and 5.8, a city with minimal environmental impact and Māori and health of water bodies and connections to them. Those were two of the areas you suggest in your submission, I think, that the scoring would not be where you might place that.
Yes.
So my question really is, if perchance the scoring was shifted to the way that you would have seen it, being more appropriate, do you think we would have arrived at a different scenario looking ahead?
Yes, I do. Setting aside that details of that process, what I'm really asking the council to do is revisit that balance between growing out and growing up. It doesn't appear to have been revised in the light of all these new developments of the past 5 years. Some councils have changed to stopping growing out entirely, but certainly reducing that 55% figure down to a smaller figure like 20 or 25%, that would be better for the environment and better for the city than what is proposed now. And I said this already, but this development strategy should be determined together with the stormwater strategy. They're clearly linked.
Thank you very much.
Chair Rachel online.
No, Fiona's covered off my question.
Excellent. All right. Well, look, thank you, Robert. There's no more questions. We appreciate you submitting and even doing your own summary evaluation and submitting that to us. Thank you very much. And look, as all submissions, we will take those your comments and your into our deliberation, and appreciate you doing that. Thank you. All right, colleagues, we're 5 minutes over, so we will have a break, and we come back at 11 o'clock. And to you, Chair Rachel, we'll see you back online at 11. Thank you.